Every breath you have ever taken was a gift you never had to ask for, delivered silently, invisibly, without interruption, every second of your life. Tonight, while you sleep, that gift disappears. And when the world wakes up tomorrow morning, the planet it wakes up on will not be the one it fell asleep on. The atmosphere is not just the air you breathe, it is the pressure keeping your blood from boiling, the shield blocking radiation that would cook your DNA in minutes, the blanket holding surface temperatures in a range where life is possible, and the engine driving every weather system that has ever produced fresh water on this planet. Lose the atmosphere, and you do not just lose oxygen. You lose everything that made Earth different from every other dead rock in this solar system. It begins without a sound. That is the first thing that tells you something is wrong. Sound requires air to travel. As atmospheric pressure begins dropping in those first minutes, sound does not fade gradually. It thins. Voices carry less. Wind disappears. The world becomes progressively quieter in a way that feels deeply wrong before your brain can explain why. By the time pressure has dropped to half of normal, the silence is total. You are breathing, but the air is no longer pushing back the way it should. Your lungs were designed to work against atmospheric pressure. Without it, drawing a full breath becomes like trying to inflate a balloon with no resistance. The mechanism stops working correctly. At altitude, it happens faster. Anyone above 10,000 feet loses consciousness within seconds, as the pressure drop crosses the threshold the human body cannot compensate for. At sea level, the timeline is longer, but the direction is the same. The sky changes color. Blue sky is caused by atmospheric scattering of sunlight, the molecules in the air bending light in specific ways. As the atmosphere thins, the blue drains out of the sky from the top down. Within minutes, the upper sky is black. Not the black of night, but the black of space, visible in the middle of the day. Stars appearing above a horizon that still shows the last traces of blue. It is one of the most visually striking and deeply terrifying things a human eye could witness. Your skin begins to feel it. Exposed surfaces experience a tingling that is not cold. It is pressure loss. The moisture on your skin begins to evaporate faster than it should. Your eyes dry out within seconds of exposure without blinking. But pressure is just the first thing that kills. What happens to water without an atmosphere is one of the most counterintuitive consequences of this entire scenario, and one of the most total. Water boils when the vapor pressure of the liquid exceeds the surrounding atmospheric pressure. This is why water boils at a lower temperature at high altitude. Less atmospheric pressure means boiling happens sooner. Remove atmospheric pressure entirely, and water does not need heat to boil. At zero atmospheric pressure, water at room temperature, the temperature of a lake on a mild afternoon, begins vaporizing spontaneously, not slowly, not in isolated patches, across every exposed water surface on the planet simultaneously. The oceans do not drain, they evaporate. The surface layer of every ocean, every lake, every river begins converting to vapor within minutes of pressure reaching critical lows. The vapor does not form clouds. There is no longer enough atmospheric pressure to hold water in suspension. It rises, disperses, and begins escaping into space. Not all at once, but consistently, irreversibly, with nothing to stop it. And while the oceans are disappearing, the sky is being stripped of something else. Temperature control collapses at the same time. The atmosphere acts as a thermal buffer, absorbing solar energy during the day and releasing it slowly at night, keeping surface temperatures within a survivable range. Without it, the day side of Earth, facing the sun with no insulating layer, begins climbing toward 120 degrees Celsius within hours. The night side, with no stored heat and no atmosphere to retain it, begins dropping toward minus 180 degrees Celsius before morning. These are not gradual changes. They are directional and accelerating, with nothing to slow them down. The radiation arrives next, and it does not announce itself. The atmosphere blocks approximately 99% of the ultraviolet radiation the sun constantly emits. This is not a passive function. It is active, continuous, and the reason complex life exists on this planet's surface at all. The moment that SHIELD disappears, the full spectrum of solar radiation reaches the surface unfiltered. UV radiation at full solar intensity damages DNA on direct exposure within minutes, not over years of sun exposure. Within minutes of unprotected contact with unfiltered sunlight. Every organism on the surface with exposed biological material begins experiencing cellular breakdown almost immediately. It is not burns in the conventional sense. It is molecular disruption at the level where cells can no longer replicate correctly. Solar wind arrives next. The sun constantly emits a stream of charged particles that the atmosphere and magnetic field work together to deflect. Without the atmosphere's contribution to that deflection, solar wind begins interacting directly with the surface, stripping away remaining particles, interfering with any remaining electrical systems, and adding another layer of radiation exposure on top of the UV already hitting the ground. Cosmic rays, high-energy particles from outside the solar system, penetrate further than solar radiation. The atmosphere provided meaningful protection against these as well. Without it, cosmic ray exposure at the surface increases to levels that compromise biological systems even underground to certain depths. Mars lost its atmosphere approximately 4 billion years ago. What Mars looks like today, barren, irradiated, frozen, silent, is a preview. But here is what most people never consider: what happens underground. Because not everything on this planet breathes air. The surface becomes uninhabitable within hours. Underground is a different story. Extremophile bacteria, organisms that evolved in conditions of extreme heat, cold, pressure, and radiation, exist in rock formations miles beneath the surface. These organisms do not require sunlight, do not require surface pressure, and in many cases do not require oxygen. For them, the loss of the atmosphere is an event happening in a world they have never been part of. They survive indefinitely, as they have survived every mass extinction event in Earth's history, in the dark and the pressure and the heat of deep rock. The deep ocean buys more time than the surface. The weight of miles of water above provides pressure independent of the atmosphere, meaning deep ocean ecosystems remain pressure stable for longer than anything on the surface. Hydrothermal vent communities at the ocean floor, running entirely on chemical energy from the Earth's core, continue functioning. The surface of the ocean is evaporating. Miles below, life continues as if nothing has changed. Humans in sealed underground environments, with stored air, stored water, and energy sources independent of the surface, survive for as long as their supplies hold. Weeks, months, theoretically years, with the right preparation. But there is no coming back to the surface, and there is no resupply from a world that no longer has a surface worth returning to. Seeds buried in deep permafrost carry the genetic blueprint of surface life in a dormant state that can survive extraordinary conditions. They are not alive in any active sense, but the information is preserved. The question of whether that information ever finds conditions to express itself again is a question measured in geological time. But there is one consequence of losing the atmosphere that takes centuries to complete, and it is the most permanent of all. The transformation does not happen overnight, but it is inevitable from the first minute the atmosphere is gone. Solar wind, without the atmosphere to deflect it, begins a slow and relentless process of stripping particles from the surface, not dramatically, grain by grain, molecule by molecule, at a rate that compounds over decades and centuries. The same process that stripped Mars of its surface water and most of its remaining atmospheric traces over billions of years accelerates on Earth, because Earth is closer to the sun and receives more solar wind pressure. Weather stops. Not because temperatures equalize, they do not, but because weather requires an atmosphere to exist. No atmosphere means no wind, no clouds, no precipitation, no erosion from water or air. The surface, already transformed by radiation and temperature extremes, locks into a static state. What exists on the surface at the moment the last atmosphere disperses is what exists there permanently, unchanged, for billions of years. The planet does not explode. It does not shatter. It simply becomes still, irradiated, temperature-locked, waterless, soundless, and still. Viewed from space, the blue and white of Earth, the color of water and atmosphere, fades. What remains is a rocky surface in shades of brown and gray, orbiting the sun in silence, carrying no signal that anything ever lived there. Every ocean that ever existed, every forest, every mountain, every city, every record of every moment in the history of life on this planet, preserved in rock below the surface, unreadable, in a world with no one left to read it. You took a breath just now without thinking about it. You have done it every moment of your life without ever once having to decide to. If this changed the way you think about the air around you, hit like, subscribe, and tell me in the comments. How long do you think you personally could survive if this happened tonight?